Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar titled Removing Roadblocks, Overcoming Barriers to Safety Improvement. I'm Rachel Proper, Communications Rep for Caterpillar Safety Services, and I'll facilitate today's event on behalf of Abby Rhodes. First, just a couple of quick announcements. The phone lines are on mute, so if you have any questions, please go ahead and submit them through the Q&A or chat areas of WebEx. Additionally, this event is being recorded, and a link to the recording, including the slide presentations and audio, will be posted at safety.cat.com later today. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the site and an invitation to complete a brief survey. Please take the time to complete the survey, as your feedback will help us improve the events in the future. Now, I'm honored to introduce today's presenters. First, Todd Efird is a Senior Safety Consultant with Caterpillar Safety Services. Todd is a certified safety professional with more than 25 years of experience in key safety leadership roles. He is a professional member of the American Society of Safety Engineers and holds a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from Louisiana Tech University. Our guest presenter today is David Watts, the Vice President and Director of Safety for Atkinson Construction. Under his guidance, Atkinson has developed successful processes that have engaged all employees and established a culture of safety within the organization. David has helped communicate safety as a core Atkinson value and had a primary role in reducing the company's recordable and lost time incident rates. He's a strong advocate for Caterpillar cultural improvement processes, which you will learn about today. Todd, if you'd like to take it over.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate the introduction. To set the tone for today, sort of lay the foundation for where we're going to go, let's move into the first slide, Rachel. I want to introduce the group as a foundational element for our discussion today to the 6 criteria for safety excellence. Dr. Peterson, Dr. Dan Peterson, the late Dr. Peterson, identified these 6 criteria, or principles, if you will, as being foundational to any strong safety culture. And one of the things that we have found as we worked with customers around the globe, our top performing customers with respect to sustained safety excellence results have these 6 things in common. Today, where we're going to lead Dave is in the 4th element, which is employees are actively participating. And I want to expand upon that and say that we really want to dive into going beyond just participating and how to engage employees and use their hearts and minds, and how do we engage them in a way that encourages them to do the right thing when no one else is looking. So that's really the foundation by which we're going to lead you through the journey today. So what I'd like to do to start is to move to the next slide and ask Dave, if you would you start by just sort of giving the group an introduction to you and your organization and a little bit about the journey that Atkinson Construction is on in terms of cultural improvement.
Sure. Before we dive into that, Todd, I want to talk just a bit about something that Dr. Peterson quoted some time ago. He said that the nature of leadership at all levels of the organization must be engaged. And I could not agree more, but the concept of leadership is often misapplied to only those at the top of the food chain in an organization. The 6 criteria of safety excellence are, I find, to be the basis or foundation by which to benchmark your current culture against. I'm always very interested to hear how other safety professionals and CEOs interpret this, particularly the criteria of being engaged and being actively participating. Quite often, people at the front line, supervisors at the front line, employees at the front line are not considered to be leaders, but in any safety culture, they are absolutely leaders, and all people in the organization should be considered leaders. So with that said, moving on to our journey at Atkinson, I know we're going to cover a lot of ground today, and some of it might happen pretty quickly. In the event that any of you have follow-up questions, please feel free to email me at my email address, which is up on the screen, if you have any follow-up questions regarding this webinar. We'll talk about all of these points throughout the coming slides, all of these points on the slide. Speak Up, Listen Up is a foundational product within Atkinson. It's something that helps us to establish the foundation of safety culture in Atkinson, creating a ground of common understanding and rules of engagement for safety conversations. It's key to our implementation process because if we don't have rules of engagement for safety conversations, we can run into people taking safety off in different directions, particularly the safety culture journey that we're on. It also, establishing these rules of engagement helps us to eliminate barriers, these implementation barriers for continuous safety culture improvement. Speak Up, Listen Up is such a passionate tool for us that all of our employees, every single employee from the front line all the way up to our corporate suite, everybody is required to take the course and to refresh on the course every 3 years. Does that answer your question, Todd? Hello?
Todd, are you there?
Oh, sorry, guys. Yes, it does, Dave. And if you wouldn't mind, as we move into the next slide, talking a little bit about the fear and anxiety that coworkers have in speaking up, and the tools that are embedded within Speak Up, Listen Up to not only engage a new employee who might be fearful of fitting into the work group norm, but also how to engage a seasoned employee who tends to follow the cultural norm from maybe years past.
Yeah, well, we find that employees that join Atkinson come from many varied cultures. Some cultures are advanced safety cultures, and other cultures are not quite so advanced. So the concept of speaking up is one that requires courage in most scenarios, regardless of the cultures that they come from. And it's imperative for us to set the ground rules and make sure that employees know and understand that Atkinson values these conversations. We value the courage that it takes for an employee to speak up to another employee. We value the courage it takes for an employee to lift up a safety concern that may not even involve employees. We have a number of success stories, and we have a number of challenge stories where Speak Up, Listen Up allows the company and allows our leadership, from frontline leaders all the way up to the C-suite leaders, to decide how they're going to engage on a given safety topic. One example we had was a young engineer that had just transitioned from being an intern to becoming a full-time employee, and he was on a night shift operation where the work was to be setting girders about 80 to 90 feet up in the air, and we had a lot of rental equipment on site. It was a pretty expensive operation, and he made an observation that we were not likely going to clear some high voltage lines. He lifted this issue up to one of our most senior engineers. They took a look at the situation and decided to suspend the work activity until we could make the assessment and determine if we did have the clearance. And in the short end of that story is we did not have the clearance, and had we proceeded with the work, very likely we would have had a very significant concern develop. So that's one of our win stories. And the great thing about the Speak Up, Listen Up product is if you're paying attention while you're rolling out this program and you listen to what's occurring in your organization, you will find phenomenal examples of ways to lift up this whole process and use it as a foundational tool for the organization to establish what the core values are with regards to safety in the organization.
Dave, thanks a million for sharing that example. I think that speaks volumes to the results that you've been able to achieve of using the tool. If if you wouldn't mind, Rachel, let's bounce forward a couple of slides and let Dave dive into a little discussion about the tool itself. When you look at the two components of this communication tool, they're divided into, what do I do when I see something? As your example said, I see something, I'm going to speak up. And then the second part is what happens if somebody sees me doing something, and what am I likely to do? How am I likely to respond? And in this section, it focuses on the speak up part to your example. Could you talk a little bit about those three steps and how you use those or train your employees in those simple steps, Dave? And I think it is, yes, she's got the slide up now. It's the program objectives there.
Sure. So, the program is broken up into two components, speak up and listen up. And originally it was produced as two different components, but through our teaching of the course, we came to understand that it really is one program. So the first part of the program is speak up, and the three steps are ask if you can talk about a situation. Second part is get a commitment from that individual to do something differently, hopefully something that is safer and is a process that we can all agree to. And then, one of the real key components is the follow up. And the way that we teach the course is we say follow up and catch them doing it right. And when you catch someone doing something right, it's a fantastic opportunity to lift them up and recognize them for having embraced the company's journey and embraced the company's core value for safety. The most challenging, absolutely the most challenging part of those three steps is the ask part. So often employees find it challenging to initiate the conversation. Well, one of the most significant benefits of the Speak Up, Listen Up program is that if everyone in the organization receives this training, then everyone in the organization receives the training about this part, about asking. So everybody has an understanding or an expectation of what the rules of engagement look like. So in our organization, it's clearly understood that when someone approaches you on a topic of safety, that it's absolutely safe ground. This is safe ground to establish a conversation, regardless of what activities are going on, the anxiety levels that might be going on because of production or scheduling. When an issue of safety is raised, it's time to take a time out and to have a real, genuine conversation about the concerns that the individual is lifting up.
Great, Dave. I appreciate that. One other follow-up question on that piece, and then I want to bounce forward, Rachel, and if you would, go ahead and bounce forward while I'm asking Dave the question to the Listen Up section. It's titled Listen Up, Commit to Receive. Dave, for the participants on the phone, can you give them an idea about how long it takes to train this particular part and this particular tool, and then how long it takes to really implement and get it embedded and deeply rooted into the culture where people feel comfortable and trust it?
Sure. So as far as speaking to the training time or the amount of time it takes to conduct this class, it really depends on the level of engagement that the facilitator has with the audience. In Atkinson, we have a great deal of fun doing the role plays during the training, and oftentimes when you get the audience engaged and involved, and that is a facilitator skill set. But the bottom line is we typically teach the course in about an hour and a half to 2 hours for both Speak Up and Listen Up. With regards to the three steps of giving feedback, ask, commit, and follow up, it takes some time, and I'll be honest with you, it doesn't always follow in those three steps. Quite often, when the ask portion of the process is utilized, a conversation begins, and oftentimes that commit part comes through the conversation. It's not a step that the participants actually have to remember. Or oftentimes we find that if the conversations are very genuine, the commit and follow up part happens just out of just natural course of things. So we don't really stress to our employees that they have to follow this process, but just ensure that the conversation that they have includes these elements eventually.
I appreciate that, Dave. And one of the things I want to add to what Dave is saying there, when you start to train frontline employees in this type of process, I think one of the things that we find is that the simpler the better, and you don't want to make it so complicated that people can't remember. It's not really about the steps. It's about ensuring that they know where to start and that it's okay to speak up when you see something, and you can trust that is safe to do that. You won't be ridiculed for it. On the contrary, you're going to be recognized for the fact that you're bringing up a possible near miss or whatever it is. And if those 3 steps help you to get there, then great. If you need to use something else and alter that, I think that's part of the flexibility that Dr. Peterson said needs to happen within every organization, because no 2 organizations are the same.
And Todd, back to the original question as well, as far as like how long does it take to get this program ingrained and embedded into the culture? One of the things that we, in order for me to tell the story for Atkinson, we'd probably need to explain some of our history. And the journey that we experienced at Atkinson began with a relatively unfortunate journey. But I'd like to take a minute to share that with you. I joined Atkinson in August of 2005, and in I think it was September, October, we initiated the continuous improvement processes offered by Caterpillar, beginning with a safety perception survey of all of our employees. We had about a 98% participation in that process, and to deliver that safety perception survey took a few months to get it throughout our entire organization, and by November, December, we had all of the surveys completed, and they were being processed for the report. In February of 2006, we had an employee enter an excavation, actually followed his supervisor into an excavation, and that excavation collapsed, and we lost Leo, who was one of our employees. I would tell you that prior to this excavation operation, we had a comprehensive job hazard analysis done on the activity, and all the steps were agreed to, and the senior-most supervisor changed that activity on the day of the incident and did not coordinate that well with all of the other employees. And in the course of doing the investigation of Leo's fatality, I had the benefit of sitting in on the individual employees' interviews. And one of the things that became very clear to us was that in our job hazard analysis meeting, we had agreed that anyone in the group could have stopped the activity. That had been pre-discussed before the operation, and it was agreed to, yet no one spoke up. When the change in activity occurred throughout the interviews, we heard everyone say that's not what we planned to do, and it became very clear to us that we needed to have a process or rules of engagement established with regards to safety. And it's my belief that was one of the catalytic events in the development of the Speak Up, Listen Up program. And I can tell you that since we have introduced it, so we introduced Speak Up, Listen Up as soon as it was available on the market, and it probably took us 6 to 8 months to get everyone in the organization trained. We had at the time probably 700 employees throughout the country, and making sure that our safety department was training this program in the means and the methods that it was designed took some time. And we were faced with challenges almost immediately with regards to how the program was embraced by employees, There were new lines, new barriers that were tested with regards to how the organization, how our leadership was going to respond to different situations and scenarios. When an employee speaks up, say a lower-ranked employee, a frontline craft employee speaks up about a manager perhaps not wearing the proper foot attire on the job site, how we as an organization deal with those things. So it's very, very important for the entire organization to embrace this rollout process. I would say within 6 months, we started to receive overwhelming positive feedback about the change in the safety culture in the organization as a result of establishing these rules of engagement for our safety conversations. So, and we're now probably 6-7 years into this process, and it is without a doubt one of the most significant components for establishing a great safety culture in an organization.
Dave, thanks for that. And one more quick question before we move into the listen up portion, and this one comes from one of the participants on the webinar. How did Atkinson sell the idea to employees that safety discussions are safe grounds? Sometimes that message is a hard sell.
It's most definitely a hard sell. And what I would tell you is the way that we were able to change that perception or to modify that perception was how we reacted to these scenarios that occurred as we were launching the training. So if I'll give you an example. We had a regional executive that was it was a corporate executive that was visiting one of our job sites and happened to be wearing casual shoes on the job site, and a craft employee lifted it up to his supervisor that was inappropriate foot attire for the job. Now, there are a lot of different ways that organizations could react or respond to that scenario. What happened in that particular case was the supervisor told the employee to mind his own business, that this was an executive from the company that that's their business. Well, we found out about that at the corporate office a couple of weeks later. Now, we have a choice. We could let it go or we could engage. And what we decided to do was to engage. So the corporate executive and myself flew back out to California. We tracked down the foreman and we tracked down the employee. Now, I think a lot of organizations would have a tendency to discipline the supervisor. We chose to rather coach and mentor the employee and have them have a better understanding of what our value for these safety conversations were and the courage it took for that employee to lift up the issue. The executive in question actually gave a financial gratuity to the employee that lifted up the question to begin with. What was really positive about this is that we maintained the message throughout the whole thing as being positive. This is what we want. These are the behaviors that we want. And it was amazing. It traveled like wildfire throughout the entire company. People heard about it, and all of a sudden everybody began to understand it's safe ground to bring up safety concerns. And when you stand behind that message time after time after time, you begin to really influence a staying power of that cultural value that Atkinson wants to hear about your concerns related to safety. You've got to be careful, though, because the bottom line is if somebody backsteps on that or they say something that contradicts that message, you will have to go back in and clean up that mess.
That's a great example, Dave, and I really appreciate you using examples to illustrate how you're doing this. I'd like to move into the listen up portion just to make sure we have time for that portion as well, and to sort of set the context and the groundwork here. There are two components, again, of this particular tool that Dave used. He was talking about the speak up piece, which is when you see something, how do you speak up? Ask, get a commitment, follow up. The second portion is listen up, and this one is targeted at any employee who might be doing something that is unsafe, and now they are being approached by someone else. And the program objectives here are, what are your response styles? Are you likely to be more of a type A and defensive about the feedback? Are you likely to be more passive about the feedback? And there's a training module that identifies tendencies of employees and allows them to think about their style. Dave, could you talk a little bit about this particular piece versus the Speak Up, how long it takes to implement, and how it fits with the Listen Up? Did you do those back to back, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we've always taught the entire Speak Up, Listen Up program as if it was just one course. In order to have a good quality safety conversation, there has to be someone talking and someone listening. There are significant barriers, though, at times that prevent those conversations from initially looking like a comfortable one and a friendly one. I sometimes chuckle when we get into the listen up portion of this, because in order to listen, sometimes there are barriers that have to be removed. There are so many different personality types. We work in the construction industry. We have a pretty rough and tumble group of folks that work for us, and we often get some pretty strong response behaviors that show up during the initiation of these conversations, or at least early on in the program we did. I would say today that those have mellowed significantly. Occasionally we get new employees that come to the organization, and those people they learn very quickly that in our organization, how we engage in safety conversation, that these rules of engagement are completely embraced by our culture. The two steps are listen and commit. The listening part sometimes takes some skills development for individuals, and oftentimes we will have employees or supervisors that have been involved with Atkinson longer, and they'll get involved in those conversations if they see they start to steer in the wrong direction. Oftentimes we'll have subcontractors that come onto our job sites, and they're very new to our culture, and they're very unaccustomed to being approached by someone that's not from their company. So we find that pretty quickly, within the first couple of days of people being introduced to the safety culture at Atkinson, that they are, within those first couple of days, they have had at least one or two conversations with employees from our organization on the topic of safety or safety concerns. So they very quickly adapt to our culture, and we often receive feedback from those people when they've gone away from our organization and then returned for new work, that they really enjoy working in the atmosphere at Atkinson because they know that it's safe ground to have these conversations about safety concerns.
Great, Dave. Can you give the participants an idea of about how long this particular module takes to train? And did you see the same type of engagement here? Did it take several months for people to realize their styles? What's the cultural aspect of this in terms of rooting it into your culture?
Again, I would have to say that the Speak Up module or portion of the training probably takes the most time to teach, because you're really functioning on those building the courage to engage in the conversation, and we, like I said, we go into a lot of role plays. There are role plays for the listen up portion. We find, though, at Atkinson that by the time you get to the listen up section, the listen up section can take as little as 20 to 30 minutes to teach, because you've really covered a lot of that ground during the Speak Up portion of the training. As far as the listening up, I would say it all goes hand in hand with how long it takes an organization to embrace the cultural value of this training. Every organization comes to this training from a different place in their safety culture. We have found some of our subcontractors that are faced with some more significant challenges with regards to their safety culture. Sometimes it takes them a little bit longer to get engaged and really believe in the processes. But I will tell you, in the long run, and I'm not talking 6 months, usually within the first few weeks of being exposed to a healthy safety culture where Speak Up, Listen Up is entrenched in the company's values, the employees quickly realize, and new employees quickly realize that it's different. at Atkinson. It's not the same as some of the contractors that they've worked for in the past. That these conversations are safe to have. So it does not take long if you truly nurture this process from the very beginning and get it ingrained in your organization.
Thanks, Dave. And one of the things I want to add to what Dave is saying here, too, in the listen up portion, one of the real keys as we train this with a variety of customers and different types of businesses, it's always very interesting to see how your employees stack up in those three categories of listening, whether they're passive or assertive or aggressive. And once they find themselves in one of those categories, it's really interesting to see the reaction in the training class of how they see themselves when other people talk to them about safety. And I couldn't agree more. This particular piece doesn't take as long, Dave, because you've laid the foundation with Speak Up. But I think that piece with those three types, it allows them to find who they are and assess themselves so they can come to a reality of how they're going to engage in this if somebody sees them. It's not just speaking up. It's about listening when somebody's speaking up to you. And so I think that's one of the key components in that listen up piece.
Yeah, and it's, Todd, I would tell you that this particular exercise during the listen up is probably where we spend the majority of the time. There's a great assessment tool that's part of the training package that allows every participant in the training to kind of figure out which of these three categories they fit in. And, there's no right answer. You are who you are, and you tend to respond to these kinds of concerns in one of these three areas. And, it's very important for the people that are speaking up to understand that they're likely going to get one of these three behavioral styles when they speak up. And it's important for them to learn for themselves how to react to those. The one thing that's really key to this program is for the person that works up the courage to speak up, they are trained through the program to understand they are not responsible at all for how the other person reacts to that. Now, I speak that a little bit differently when we train it. I say if you go in very assertive or very aggressive with your asking portion, you should expect to probably get that very assertive, aggressive response back. But if you go into it, we find that if an employee goes into the initiation of that conversation saying, look, I'm concerned about something that I'm seeing here, and I'd like to share my concern with you. Usually if you approach from that very personal, very caring perspective, you usually get that kind of a response back. Now, if the person being observed is under some other pressures that you're not aware of, you can still end up getting, assertive or aggressive responses. But, the program spends a great deal of time, particularly in the listen up piece, getting all of the participants to understand these three categories and to understand how to work within those constraints.
Super. I appreciate the detail behind that, Dave. One question I want to circle back to that was on our objective slide. I'd like for you to take a little time before we run out of time here today to allow you to talk about the consortium and the change in the product and the tool and the work that was done there and why you believe that was valuable from the original Speak Up, Listen Up tool back in 2005 to where you are today.
Sure. So, I'm so excited about the new product that we've developed for Speak Up, Listen Up. It's Speak Up, Listen Up for construction. This was a conceptual idea that began probably about 3.5 years ago. Atkinson is a member of a consortium of contractors. We call it the Heavy Civil Safety Summit Group, and it's some of the largest contractors Rachel, if you could go to the second to the last slide, I think we've got a visual there of the contractors that are represented. So at any rate, about 3 years ago, I presented on Speak Up, Listen Up in front of this group as a best practice for Atkinson. And it became clear to the member companies that we would like to see a construction version of this product. So we approached Doug Oberhelm, the CEO of Caterpillar, and asked him if he would be interested in partnering with our companies. And we were able to develop this partnership of 16 contractors in Caterpillar. Caterpillar Corporate made a significant contribution, and Caterpillar Safety Services also made a significant contribution. And then each of the contractors contributed to the cost of developing this product. So it's one of the first times to my knowledge, where these contractors have all gotten together and said, we're going to develop something for the industry. The program that the contract that we developed with Caterpillar allows us to share this product at deep discounts with all of our subcontractors that work with all of these companies. We have the ability to extend offers to other contractors as well. So it's all about a philanthropic approach to getting this product out to the industry. So we're very excited about that. We just concluded the project last week. It actually started shipping, I believe, on Monday. So we're very excited about that. And the delta between the two products is obviously ours is very specific to construction. The visual images are construction in the training materials. The original product is still a fantastic product. It's a product that Atkinson has used for the last 7 years. There are some general industry scenes, so it is a product that can be used throughout all industries. They are both exceptional products. One of the most significant developments, though, for the construction piece was the development of a leadership component. So in the original version of Speak Up, Listen Up, the primary focus was on frontline supervision, mid-level managers, and frontline employees and how they could engage in these new rules of safety conversations. Well, as we launched this product with Atkinson 7 years ago, we began to understand that there is a significant role and a significant piece for top leadership to support the rollout of Speak Up, Listen Up, and to nurture the process throughout. So our leadership is constantly listening for the right opportunities to reinforce the values of Speak Up, Listen Up. So we thought it important to develop that component for the new Speak Up, Listen Up for construction.
Great, Dave. I appreciate that background. A couple of questions from the participants that I'd like to ask you. How often do you being Atkinson, measure safety improvement success as a whole, and do you have a way to measure the engagement of employees in this process?
So to start, to kind of go back to the very beginning of our journey, I spoke of the Safety Perception Survey. That is our benchmarking tool. It's a way for us to take a snapshot of our organization, and we do that snapshot probably every 18 to 24 months. We survey as many employees as we can reach out to. We always try and get at least 95 to 98% participation in the Safety Perception Survey. The survey allows us to grade our current state of safety culture on 21 categories of safety culture development. We focus our attention on whatever our low-scoring categories are. This allows us an opportunity to stay fresh with whatever activities we're doing. The activities that develop from the results of the survey look like, in our world, a process called continuous safety improvement teams. So each of our regions will get their scores results back. They develop teams, subject-specific teams, focused on those low-scoring categories, and they develop plans and activities and defined accountabilities for whatever the topic is that they've decided to focus their time and energy on. So there's a continuous process of continually looking at our culture and continually getting feedback. We find that the way to measure our employee engagement is to look at what our frontline employee scores are in the Safety Perception Survey. We consistently have high scores. We consistently have a high level of volunteerism with regards to the continuous safety improvement teams. The employees enjoy being involved in those processes because they know that they get recognition for being involved in those processes.
I appreciate that, Dave, and I really appreciate you focusing on the upstream measures, the things that you can control. I know that most everybody on the phone probably has some sort of an outcome measure that they measure, either workers' comp costs per employee, incidence rates, whatever that blend might be. Can you talk a little bit about the investment that you've made in these training and upstream tools and how that's impacted your outcome results like frequency rate and cost and so forth? I'm sure that some of the participants are interested in how those are impacted as well.
Sure. So, one of the most significant challenges in the journey from 2005 to today, even today, is getting top leadership to look at things other than experience modifiers and lagging indicators, recordable rates, lost time rates. Our lost time rates are, we're in the top performers in our industry. I will tell you that the biggest part of my responsibility is working with top leadership to transition them away from that thinking. And it's, whenever you talk with safety folks and or leaders in organizations, they always start that conversation with, yes, but we always have to keep an eye on the lagging indicators. And I agree with that. There's no question that the lagging indicators are important to particularly the construction industry because we get awarded contracts based on whether or not our lagging indicators are in the right place. So bottom line is we're always going to be focused on that. But what we train our leadership is to speak about the activities and the work processes that we develop that beget us the results. So we have a tendency to lean towards and focus towards the right activities. One of our daily activities is daily pre-planning of our work, and we have a process, like many companies do, to document that. And we tend to focus our conversations on what are the quality of those conversations, how often are those conversations occurring, and how often does leadership or mid-level management get involved in those processes. And we tend to track on that level of engagement more so than we do on the results, which are the lagging indicators.
I appreciate it, Dave. And I don't want to press you too hard on this one. I don't know if you are able to share any specific results in terms of incidence rates or cost reduction over a period of time.
Sure.
If you can, that would be super. If
Sure.
you can't, I understand.
When I came on board with Atkinson in 2005, as a whole, the company was experiencing about $2 million a year in losses. In the transition, we in the first 6 months of implementing the processes, notwithstanding the fatality that we had to recover from, we were able to significantly reduce. I believe the first year's reduction, we were under $1 million after the first year, and we've seen a continuous reduction. We've kind of stabilized at around probably $200,000 to $250,000 per year at this point. But we're still focusing on continuous improvement in that regard. And the one thing that I am proud to say is that we've not had what many in the industry would consider serious injuries. We don't have those anymore. We don't have the significant losses. Most of what makes up those the $250,000 worth of losses each year are the cuts and scrapes, and obviously we're trying to eliminate all of those. And some of our business units have done very well. We've had one of our business units went 3 years without a recordable injury. We've had, I believe, periods of success on lost time where it was 2 to 3 years without a lost time injury. But we're also very pragmatic about the injuries. These are the outcomes. The injuries are the outcomes of our safety culture. And when an injury occurs, it's time for us to look at our culture. Where did the culture stumble? What about that incident needs to be looked at, and how we lift that up as an organization also has an impact on our safety culture. And the tenets of Speak Up, Listen Up are alive and well throughout all those processes.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the level of detail and your willingness to share that information. I have another question from one of the participants on the call. What kind of rewards and recognition are given for employee participation in this process to encourage them?
It varies per situation. It varies per business unit. We give a great deal of flexibility to our business units in how they deal with recognition. I would say early on in 2006, 2007, there was a great deal of emphasis in looking for those challenging Speak Up events, Speak Up, Listen Up events, those incidents that occurred. And when we identified something that we thought should be lifted up, and oftentimes your instincts can be wrong. Like you might want to say, oh, well, we definitely don't want to lift that one up. Well, I'll give an example. We had a superintendent out on one of our mining projects that stood up on a tailgate and said to the masses in a mass safety meeting, I love this Speak Up, Listen Up program. I speak up and you listen up. Well, that kind of set us backwards several steps, caused me to get on a plane and go spend some time with this employee. But what I'll tell you is the positive, we decided to lift it up. We decided to say, look, this is not what we want. This is not the message that we want to communicate. So we spent some time coaching and mentoring the superintendent that made this faux pas, and we actually convinced him. We said, look, you're going to become our poster child for Speak Up, Listen Up. And we actually took him on the road, and he actually, it changed his world. He became one of our most ardent safety advocates for the company. He went from being what we refer to sometimes as a caveman or citizens against virtually everything to being a strong safety advocate for Atkinson and its safety culture. So you can take a negative scenario that occurs from one of these events or this journey, and depending on how you and your leadership decide to embrace it, you can lift it up and make a positive out of a negative occurrence.
That's a great example, Dave. And I think if you take that in a broader context, I think, every organization is going to experience their version of that. Someone who either ridicules or mocks the process and who hasn't come around. And I think early on, if you decide to engage in this process, you need to look for those. You need to know that they're going to happen, and you need to be aware to the extent that you're looking for them, and then have a plan in place to deal with that in a positive way. And sounds like you guys did very well with that, Dave, and I appreciate you sharing the example. Well, I have another question from a participant here. What would you say to companies that say that incidents and accidents are the cost of doing business and reaching zero is impossible?
Well, yeah, it's interesting that question comes up. Zero is, or as I refer to it, zero speak, is something that's very common in our profession, and there are a lot of organizations that are very committed to trying to achieve zero injuries. I don't think that there's a safety professional out there that wouldn't say that they're committed to attempting to reach zero. We do it for periods of time at Atkinson. I know some companies are very successful at achieving zero for periods of time. The one thing that I'm always concerned about an organization that so aggressively pursues zero is that sometimes you send a message that influences employees to not report things because they don't want to break the zero record. And I think in Speak Up, Listen Up, the tenets or the values that you're teaching there are, it's important to speak up no matter what. Don't be worried about the zero goal. We personally at Atkinson, we don't embrace zero. What we embrace is the reduction of harm, the reduction of risk. It's all about communicating to our employees that we don't want them to take a risk, and we find that those conversations have a tendency to be received by our employees in a more genuine fashion. I think that the employees out there in our industry, in the heavy and civil construction industry, they realize that the work that we do is dangerous, and that there are times that sometimes somebody's not paying attention and an incident occurs. And, it's how we react as an organization, and do we stand by the values that we communicate to our employees. And I think at Atkinson we do. I'm always interested in engaging other safety professionals in this dialogue about zero speak. I think that there are better places to focus your time and energy than trying to achieve zero.
I appreciate that, Dave. Thank you for your opinion. I have another question from a participant here. When you speak about eliminating serious injuries over the last 10 years, did you specifically identify and address serious injuries directly to effectively eliminate them? And how do you characterize or define a serious injury?
Yeah, I guess, the way that I would speak about a serious injury is if the guy can't come back to work the next day, that's a serious injury. We want employees coming back to work, working with concrete and rebar and structural steel. I think there are a level of nicks, cuts, and scrapes that do occur. Bottom line is we want employees to not get hurt, and that includes cuts, nicks, and scrapes. But if we can learn from those events, if we can lift up those incidents and learn from them and share those learnings with each other, then we find that we get to a better place. When it comes to the focus on serious injuries, I would say that there was probably a focus at mid-level or mid-management and above. There was some dialogue, but the activities that we focused on had nothing to do with focusing on serious injuries. It really had more to do with communicating what our values are with regards to safety and the safety of our employees, and making sure that when incidents occurred, that what management and leadership's role looked like to the craft employees looked like we were supporting those values. And less than, it didn't look like we were overly reacting to incident rates. There's the process that you teach in your On the Front Line program of the accident reaction cycle. And we have tried very diligently over the last 8 years to make sure that our reaction to incidents occurring doesn't look like that cycle. That when incidents occur, we are embracing the learning opportunity from those incidents, whether it's a near miss all the way through a significant event.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. And another question here, and I think this is a good sign you're enticing some questions from the audience. It is difficult for a transformed operator to apply safety at home. Has Atkinson found a way to help toward this challenge? And I know one of the categories, Dave, on the survey, relates to, some of the questions to safety at home and off-the-job safety. Not to lead you towards that, but could you answer how operators who may be transformed at work apply things at home and how you measure that?
Yeah, I will tell you that measuring safety at home and measuring the influence of safety at home is a challenging process. To paraphrase the question on the safety perception survey, it essentially says, has the safety program at work had any bearing on your perception of safety at home? And we have seen an increasing, over the years, an increasing score on that category. Increasing score is good. So, in reality, though, there's a skeptical thread in me that says, the employees might be telling us what they think we want to hear on that particular question. But in reality, I find that my benchmark or my barometer on the topic of home safety is through the conversations that I have with our employees. Being a dirt bike rider myself, I have a tendency to take some risks on the weekends and do some things that are might be perceived as others as being risky and unsafe. So I'm always interested in hearing from our employees, and I will tell you, over the years, I definitely have heard different stories being told that really make it sound like our employees are taking these values-based messages related to safety home and living them at home.
Great. One more question from a participant here. Not necessarily related directly to our topic, but I think many others might be interested in the answer as well, Dave. Does Atkinson administer pre-placement physicals for all employees?
No. We do have it in our mining division. We find some of the working relationships, or I should say the relationships that we have with our union partnership, to be challenging to administer those processes. So, we try and make sure that we're hiring the best employees that we can hire. There are certain rules of engagement that prevent us from doing pre-employment assessments.
Super. One more question specifically about the safety perception survey. Are the survey results obtainable? Is it something that you would be willing to share if somebody emailed you?
Yeah, if somebody wants to email me and engage in a dialogue about what our journey has been and what the results have looked like, I would be happy to engage in that conversation.
Super. Well, I'll allow Rachel to give that information at the end as to how to contact her as well as you. I think we're getting close to our time here, so I'm going to close things off here. First of all, I want to thank Dave Watts for being willing to share his story and the Atkinson journey today. One of the objectives from Caterpillar Safety Services is to bring real life scenarios to our customers and share and benchmark so that we can all learn from each other. And I think it is so much more valuable to have someone who's been through this and ask questions of somebody who has been in the trenches than to talk about theory. So, Dave, thank you so much for joining us today. You made my job very easy, and I appreciate the level of detail. Rachel, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, Todd and David, thank you so much. I think that was a really great dialogue, and thanks to the participants for asking such great questions. As you can see on the screen, there's a website that does have our safety.cat.com/webinars if you want any additional webinar information, this one or future ones. And also, if you have any questions, if it's anything specific to David's journey, please see his email address there. He is more than willing to answer any additional questions specific to Atkinson's journey or the tools that they've used. And then if you have anything specific questions related to any of the tools you've heard about today, either Speak Up, Listen Up, even the Safety Perception Survey, you can either email safetyservices@cat.com, or if you want to shoot me a direct email, proper_Rachel_L@cat.com, that is available too. So just keep an eye out for within the next day, we'll send you a follow-up email that will have the recording of this webinar within the next day or so, as I mentioned. And we appreciate you attending today, and if you get the chance to take the brief survey and the follow-up email, we'd really appreciate that for your feedback. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. Have a great day.